when I think about this next bull phase, past the halvening into 25, 26, I think we come out of that, certainly Bitcoin over 100,000, Ethereum over 4,000. I think it's not a very aggressive call, but as the normie population moves towards like more full-scale adoption, you're going to see everything. This cycle is about those people moving in, and you're going to see everything tokenized. I mean,
we'll see. I think we'll see big price action for Bitcoin, and I think that will eventually feed into ETH and altcoins. So a spot ETF will definitely, I think, pump the market. 2024 is going to be big. Crypto is slowly but surely getting past some of these big hurdles. There is so much good news.
So I think where we are in the crypto market is we're in late spring, and late spring is when it starts to get really interesting. It's not a one-way bet. We will have periods of consolidation or, sharp sell-offs. Very normal to see a 35% correction in a crypto bull market. But spring is just the start. We've got summer to go and even into fall when the weather's still good before things turn again. So we've got a couple of years ahead of us of life-changing opportunities in one of the biggest macro trends of all time. And what's great is how people still don't yet get it, and they don't yet believe in it. They don't yet understand it. And that means we get to be first. Even if you're the class of 2012 like me, or you're the class of 2023, you will still be early, and the opportunity is ahead. This is what Dan and I think is the big macro bet. Maybe the biggest macro bet. When you see the landscape all going towards one way, and for me it was like technology and crypto, and then you just look at crypto and it just outperforms everything. It just coalesces all of your focal point into one thing. And I went like you deep down this rabbit hole. I've probably created more macro understanding of crypto than anybody else by thinking and building.
That's right.
And you've gone massively into the space. I mean, you kicked me back into the space in 2018 or 19. I hadn't given up on it. I just wasn't focused on it. And you were like, you were pretty close to, that was, I can't remember, that was like June 2018. And by October at the bottom.
And then Q1 19, I was really pounding the table. And I remember you were concerned about Tether. And I kept saying, and I remember this clearly because I said, well, the value of the space at the time, I guess, was around 300 billion, like total value in the space. And I think Tether was like 20 billion or something like that. And so I said, maybe it was, I can't remember, but I thought, okay, well, if Tether goes to zero, like, so what? It's a drop in the bucket. It was sort of the same big, like, macro value analysis with FTX. I mean, I thought the maximum total loss in FTX, like the next day would have been, it was like $10 billion. But the space is worth over $1 trillion, like the value of all the cryptocurrencies and all the equity in the space. So who cares about $10 billion, right? It was just the sentiment. There's a lot of emotion, human emotion that comes to play in this space. I have to say, because there aren't as many professionals, like, old-time portfolio managers, people who have gotten crushed many, many times. I mean, I've had, tremendous number of ups and downs over the years, right, in the traditional market. So I don't really have much emotion, when it comes to analyze the markets. But if you're a 27-year-old guy and you've never been involved in 100 different markets, and you're feeling rich one day, and wahoo, you're buying a Lambo, and then a year later you're suicidal because you've lost 80% of your money. So thankfully we get to avoid that. And I mean, I saw recently, the charts also help us because it gives us a sense of where the market is pricing. We've had a phenomenal call on Solana. I guess we can talk about that later, but I think fact that, and this was in your monthly GMI, that I think everybody should be getting. I don't know how anybody in crypto does not get the monthly GMI.
I'm really proud of it, actually. It's a bloody good publication. I've got to admit.
It's really good. But you said, look, the Logan in Solana at $20 had equivalence to you of Ethereum at, was the price?
2018 low.
Yeah,
which was
right. And the same thing, Bitcoin, you mentioned the prices, right? The beginning of the previous bull markets. And so people, should understand that when you're making that kind of comment, it's like, it's the residue of 30 years analyzing markets. It's not like you're some kind of cheerleader for the space. Like, we don't have that. I don't care about cheerleading, right? We want to get in at the right time, notice when the market is cheap, have a view about the future that others don't have, and then execute it, right? It's not a cheerleading thing, right?
No, and also you and I learned a new trick, which was that we realized that this was a long duration asset and you need to have a longer time horizon than was traditionally macro.
Yeah.
And we both had to learn that trick. You know, you have to learn it. It's hard, but you learn it, and you learn, as you're doing now, is if you've got a long duration, you should be buying in the sell-off and not selling. And, you know, I watch what you do with 1RT versus most VC investors. They're waiting for prices to go to highs.
I know.
Buying because they don't understand the macro. It's crazy. Final question for you. Do you think that the structure of the cycle changes, or does it remain the same? So let's say...
Which cycle?
The crypto cycle. Is it going to be as volatile, or is it going to be somewhat more smoothed by the sheer number of people being involved?
Well, so I think
everything's cyclical, right? We live in a cycle.
No, I think that tail end, so Bitcoin will be less volatile in these next cycles. But look, it's impossible to think that there are only going to be 2 or 3 protocols that achieve network effect, right? Arguably, and I don't want to get into this now, but arguably, like Ripple, which I don't really understand, is a $40 billion asset, and then the company is worth somewhere between 5 and 10 billion. So, and they've been around for 10 years. So ordinarily, you would say Ripple's achieved network effect. You don't hear many people really talking about how great Ripple is, but they've been around. Ripple, if it was going to go to zero, it should have gone to zero. Why hasn't it gone to zero? I don't know. We haven't done the work on the business. We probably should have. My point is that the stuff that's at the early stages of invention, the pre-public protocols that are all programmers are working on, that's going to stay as small. It'll go up 100x and then go down 99%. That's going to continue. But as these cryptocurrencies achieve network effect, the volatility goes down, period. And I think the businesses are sort of on the lower volatility at the end.
Because they have cash flow.
Yeah, because they have cash flow. I mean, the protocols have cash flow. Ethereum, I think you probably saw, was the fastest to 10 billion in revenue, or the second fastest business, if you would call it that, of all time, right? But it's not the kind of revenue that traditional investors are used to.
I've always been bullish on Ethereum. I think Ethereum is, it's a very different thing to Bitcoin. I think this is an important thing for people new to the space to understand. People talk about there being competition between Bitcoin and Ethereum. It's like they're very different things. Ethereum is this network upon which so much of this layer one upon which so much of crypto is built. Whereas Bitcoin at the moment is kind of more that store of value narrative, even though we're seeing exciting things like ordinals come along and change the game a little bit. But yeah, Ethereum underpins so much of the crypto ecosystem. And even if you're not a fan of Ethereum, even if you prefer some of the other layer one blockchains out there, or you're more of an interoperability person, you like those layer zero projects like Cosmos, for example, even if you don't like Ethereum, you can't get away from the fact that a huge amount of the crypto ecosystem is built upon it. And yes, Ethereum still has a lot of work to do. Yes, gas fees are insanely high, really. It's much cheaper to do a lot of this stuff on other blockchains, sure. But the amount of development going on in the Ethereum ecosystem is just staggering. And so, although I think a spot ETF is going to be great news, it's obviously going to help with ETH's price in the long term. I think what's more important is how much is happening on Ethereum. Now, recently we've seen network activity on Ethereum take a bit of a dip, and ETH actually went inflationary again. It now seems to be picking up again, but there is all this competition from those other layer ones. But I've been bullish on Ethereum's future for as long as I can remember, and that hasn't changed. It's still got a lot of challenges to do. But I mean, look, last year with the merge, this huge transition from proof of work to proof of stake, the Ethereum team pulled that off. It worked, this massive, massive change to the network. So I'm confident that they're going to be able to handle all the other all the other changes, all the other developments, further evolution that needs to happen in Ethereum. So yeah, I think an ETH ETF is interesting, but it doesn't change my outlook much for Ethereum. I mean, ETH tends to lag Bitcoin by one cycle. But certainly, as you say, the tokenomics have changed so much, and now the more Ethereum gets used, the more ETH gets burned, and therefore the less there is available. So in terms of price, I mean, where are we now? We're sort of hovering around the $2,000 mark. I think we could go to top of the next cycle. I think we could go sort of, I would be targeting around 5K sort of minimum. But I think it could get as high as maybe, I'm not sure 10K necessarily. I think it could get as high as maybe 8K at the top of this cycle. One thing I think is worth bearing in mind, though, is that even though we've got all this network activity happening on Ethereum, we've also got all these layer 2s building on Ethereum as well, which don't necessarily result in the burning of ETH. So that could be something to bear in mind. But again, it all feeds into just how massive Ethereum is. So yeah, I'm confident that there are bright days ahead for Ethereum, and yeah, whether we get to 10K, I'm not sure, but I think 5K would be fairly not too unrealistic.